they had a big development firm, and I said, Jim, do you realize that there's an extraordinary piece of property available just 6 blocks from the Capitol Square? It has almost 500 feet of frontage. It is facing perfect south. It would be an absolutely perfect place, I argued, for a luxury condominium. I said, Jim, why don't you do it? And he thought a second or two, and he said something I will never forget. He said, Dave, I'm too busy. Why don't you do it? I can assure you that I never, nor did Lee, neither of us ever entertained a wild and crazy thought like that. We were civic activists. We were neighborhood people. We were not real estate developers. So the question is, now what? This would have been a very bad time for us to do anything. I had a big job for deputy secretary with the state of Wisconsin of a cabinet level agency. I was writing my book on Madison and a lot of other irons in the fire. And besides that, we had a 10-year-old daughter, Christy, who was over here, and then an 8-year-old son, Peter, sitting over here in the back row. We were raising a family. And Lee was very busy too. She was a full-time real estate broker, and she was a member of the Landmarks Commission. And she was still on the neighborhood school committee and so forth. So we were busy people. And then we thought to ourselves, but if we don't do this, then one of these awful developers is going to come along and build something terrible again. But of course, we had a big problem. We didn't have $600,000 to come up with for the purchase of the land. We did think we had enough money to do the front-end development costs, you know, the architect services, the engineer services, the soil boring people, the marketing study, all the kind of front-end things you have to do to demonstrate the feasibility to lenders. But we knew one thing that almost nobody else knew, and that was quite a bit about a new financing tool called tax incremental financing, TIF. You've read about it in the papers, I'm sure. It's now a very common tool. It was just approved by the Wisconsin legislature in 1975, so you see it was fresh. It turns out that we were the first people to use it in the state of Wisconsin for any residential purpose. I'll get into this in just a moment. But before I do, I want to tell you how TIF works. It's pretty amazing. This property was assessed in 1979 at $400,000. So the city was collecting taxes on that amount. But if we would build a condominium like this at that time, the property would suddenly be worth over $3 million, and the tax revenue that the city treasurer would be collecting would be substantially greater, very substantially greater. So what the city does with this law is to create a district. They draw a boundary around a property like this, and the city keeps getting the taxes of this property based on $400,000. But because they know that there is a new development coming down the road that is going to make it more valuable, they know that they're going to have a very reliable income stream in real estate taxes coming in for a long period of time. So for 15 years, they say we will collect that increased amount. This is called the tax increment, hence the basis for the name. I think you get the idea. Now this means that the city can go out and borrow money at a very low rate and give it to the developer at the front end of the project to pay whatever expenses are necessary to make the project happen. In our case, we were proposing a $1.5 million package, about $500,000 to write down the cost of the land. That was huge. About $500,000 for public improvements, 2 public parks, one at the end of Broad Street, you all know about that, the little triangular park that we used to call Kerr-McGee, where the buses turn to go into Market neighborhood, is the other one. Fancy underground everything all up and down the streets, underground lighting, fancy street lights and the like, $500,000. And then we earmarked about $500,000 for the interest that we would have to pay on that. So that meant that if the city approved this, they could give us $1.5 million up front, and then we would pay it back over a 15-year period. I hope that's clear. It's a little bit complicated, but what a difference it makes, and I want to explain why.